Good afternoon to everybody who's joined. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes while people are joining the webinar. So just sit tight. We'll be right with you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Moshavi, Dean of the Lucas College and Graduate School of Business. Welcome to our Silicon Valley Center for Entrepreneurship speaker series that will be hosted by my colleague, Nuez, special guest, Alfonso de la Nuez. Really in for a great treat today. As you'll hear from Alfonso, he's a very successful alum. He's done some really cool things, and he's still doing some really interesting things, as he would sure tell you that every day is a new adventure. Just a couple of reminders before we get started here. One is, this, and Anu can speak more to this, but we have a number of programs within the Center for Entrepreneurship, including our Silicon Valley Innovation Challenge, which you'll hear more about and you'll see promotions about over the next couple of months. We also run a business plan competition every spring, so hopefully you can become the next Alfonso if you put your time and energy in. And there's also a variety of other workshops and ongoing events, the IDEAS group, the IDEAS Club. That space, by the way, in the student union is about to reopen. It had been shut for COVID, but that space will now be open at least Monday through Thursday. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. So with that said, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Professor Nuez.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dean Moshavi. Really excited to be having this conversation with Alfonso. And he is a very successful entrepreneur and an alumnus. So we're really excited that Alfonso could join us today. And he is, as Dean Moshavi said, he's the co-founder and CEO of UserZoom, which is an experience insight management company that helps businesses gather and manage insights into their design and their user experience. And so he is going to talk to us about what he did since he graduated from San Jose State University in the 90s. Alfonso, would you like to take it away, tell us, and then we'll ask you some questions. So what did you do from the point that you graduated from San Jose State?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a proud Spartan. I love the school and I live about 10 minutes away. And I'm very proud and honored to participate and always trying to help with other potential entrepreneurs. So I will tell you a little bit about my story. I want to keep it brief because I think the earlier we get to the questions, the better. Yeah, I'll start with a little bit of the personal introduction, which actually starts a little bit earlier than San Jose State, because there's no way that a Spaniard like me, I'm actually originally from Spain, there's no way that I would have gone to San Jose State or to an American college without some help. And it all started with the game of basketball. So if I can, I actually would like to share with you something real quick. I'm not allowed to share, otherwise I can just maybe talk about it. But if I'm allowed to share, I'll show some pictures of when I was. Am I allowed to?
Share.
There you go. So can you see the screen?
Yes.
So this is me about almost 30 years ago. As you can see here, I was a Spartan, and I think this picture over here shows that I was much stronger than I am today. And then I was able to meet one of my heroes at a conference, and many of you probably are probably too young to know who this guy is, but maybe some of you know. He's Magic Johnson, who was my hero growing up. So anyway, I was playing a lot of basketball in Spain, and I went to my parents sent me to a high school in San Diego. We're talking 1989, and I did pretty well. I had a great coach that helped me quite a bit, and I ended up getting a full scholarship at San Jose State. And so I graduated, in 1996. I got a bachelor's degree in international business, and that was the beginning of. And the reason why I'm here talking to you guys today is because of that experience. I'm extremely grateful to the school and to the coaching staff who gave me the chance to study. I went back to Spain in 1996, thinking that I would never be back to the Bay Area, thinking my family and my friends were back there, and I never thought that I would be an entrepreneur. This is one of those things that some people know right away, and based on programs like this Silicon Valley Center for Entrepreneurship, that makes things easier. So you should be grateful for all the work that Anu is doing. I didn't have any help back in the day, and certainly in Spain. So I ended up being an entrepreneur because I wanted to be my own boss, and also because I was challenging the status quo and just wanted to change things. And so basically, since 1996, I went into technology. I was, those years were the beginning of the World Wide Web and what we, know today as the internet and e-commerce. And I was working at Dell Computers for a couple of years, and then I went into a web design shop called Icon Media Lab. And after a few years, I figured, it's time for me to launch my own business. So I started a consulting business in Madrid, Spain, in 2001, right after the market crash. But it was a great milestone for me because it gave me the domain expertise. It helped me understand what an entrepreneur is. First of all, it was my first experience as an entrepreneur. And it also gave me the domain expertise to launch the second startup, which was UserZoom. As you can see here, is all about the brand. And it helped us understand, what Anu was describing, which is basically that, companies that design and develop websites and apps today are having a really difficult time delivering a great digital experience. If you are in the space of technology, you'll see that a lot of companies invest in software and IT, but not that many understand how to create a fantastic experience on the front end design. The actual interaction with the brand and the product is through a front end, right? Through a design of a website, the front, not the back end. And so this idea that started back in 2007, and I'll tell you a little bit about it in a minute, but this is what led me to come back to the Valley in 2009 and really basically throw away everything we had in Madrid, which was a great life, but really chase my dream, purely an American dream of rolling out the business here in the US from Silicon Valley, raising some money and really growing the business to where we are today. It's about a 350 employee on its way to 100 million. Which is a very nice mark. And the latest update that I haven't told you about, Anu and Dan, is that we've already targeted going public next year. So we're in an IPO readiness project. Hopefully that'll happen. I think you introduced UserZoom very well with what you described, but essentially, a software that helps businesses. We target kind of mid to large enterprises, run usability testing and user experience research projects in a very scalable way. with the mix of software and internet, of course. So our customers can create studies, all sorts of different studies, whether it's surveys or interviews. There's a whole lot of different types of templates that you can use, so that you can conduct these studies and make sure that you're designing the right product for the end user, not for the developer, not for the designer, not for the CEO, but for the end user who's going to pay you. This has become a strategic, competitive advantage for many businesses out there. There's a reason why Airbnb, without a hotel or without any properties, is worth whatever number of $1 billion they are worth today. There's a reason why Amazon is the absolute, the most valuable company in the world. They're all producing some really great digital experiences, and they're all investing in user experience and digital experience. And obviously the pandemic has helped a lot. And so that's why we're doing well, is because customers really care about what the end user, before they become a customer, and once they become a customer, they really care about their opinion, their feedback, and their behavior. That's what we do. We help them through a SaaS model. So it's an annual subscription, and our customers pay us to be able to use the product. And then we also offer them a little bit of services as well. About 20% of our revenue is professional services or managed services to train them and to help them. Some milestones that I think is good to share with you all, that I think for entrepreneurs are important, is, remember when I was telling you about my first startup? I think it's important to fall in love with the problem when you're an entrepreneur. And what do I mean by that? You really need to know, it's not because you want to launch a product or a company. That's a very romantic idea. And that helps, of course, the drive and the passion. But it's not only about that. Really, you got to understand whether you really are solving a real problem. So I always say, fall in love with the problem. The way we fell in love with the problem before UserZoom was actually going into consulting, right? The previous startup was a consulting company, a consulting model, and it allowed us to understand the gaps in the market, the reasons why there may be a UserZoom, the reasons, what is it that UserZoom was going to do? You see, through the consulting years, I think it's a great way to understand the problem. And it's almost like you're getting paid for market research, so to speak. And then you can understand where the gaps and the limitations are, and maybe you can build a specific product. In this case, what we did with UserZoom is automate, the process of doing this type of testing that used to be done in a physical location. It was limited to a physical location. So I think the first thing is, the keystones for one of the milestones for us that was so important was to start UserZoom out of basically really understanding the problem. The next thing is not just the problem, but who is the end user? Who is your customer? Who is your target customer of your product, or that you're going to solve the problem? I didn't really do a good job there, to be honest with you. We were lucky. We went in with a gut feel, but we really understood the target market. And today, with the internet and the ability to research, you really can do some research and understand those target audiences, target personas, whether they're buying personas or user personas. These are your targets that you're going to sell to, and what is their context and why would they buy from you, and all that stuff. I think those are things that are important. So for us, a real big milestone was to launch the consulting business, go through a few years of consulting, and then launch the product, the SaaS business. That was an experience that I would highly recommend to any entrepreneur out there to consider, even if it's just for a year or 2 years. The second thing about it, by the way, is that if you can actually get paid for the consulting, for the services, it's also a great way to finance or fund your product, your MVP, your minimal viable product. That's another big one, because for us, UserZoom was a bootstrap business. We didn't raise much. We raised, if I remember correctly, the first 2 years of the life of the business, we raised in many different moments during the 2 to 3 year period. We raised about $1.5 million, but that included everything: business angels, government grants, bank loans, and a family office that, kind of like business angels that came in. We were able to get to about 15 million in bookings, about 12, 13 in revenue, with that kind of capital. That's one of the biggest accomplishments, I think, I would say, about what I've done. Obviously, right now we're doing phenomenal, but to be honest with you, my recommendation to entrepreneurs is to try to delay working with investors, even though this is Silicon Valley, where there's a ton of them, pretty much for every street. But try to take it as far as possible and get as much traction as possible before you talk to the VCs. One example, one way to describe a VC for me, or a venture capital, right, or investor, is, they usually invest and they like to see a rocket. A rocket is either going to go really fast to the moon and it's going to get there, and only 1% of those actually make it, or it's going to explode on the way and it's going to go down, right? So it's either do it fast, or that's the model they're looking for. If you can control your destiny without raising much, equity is the most expensive currency. And when we got to 10 million, so we've raised a total of $150 million, which is a lot of money, but we didn't raise in the first 7 years more than 1.5 million. And when we decided to raise, which was the Series B $34 million round, I actually didn't have to pitch much. You know how there's this amazing, I'm sure there is a full course dedicated to how to pitch to investors, and it's important for sure. But the way we did it was actually very unconventional. We really didn't pitch much because we were past the $10 million mark and we were profitable. And so we were so efficient that by the time we were ready to raise, the VCs were pitching to us. I'll be honest. I know that that's a little bit of an extreme, and it's not the typical situation, but what I'm trying to tell you or share with you as an idea is that if you can take it far away, or as far as possible before you talk to the VCs, you're going to create this equity. It's almost like buying a piece of land and then building the house yourself, and then decorating it and working on it and making sure that it works really well. And somebody's going to pay you a ton of money for that house, versus going in and start hiring contractors all over the place, and then you don't actually make much money, or you don't build equity. So that was another thing we did. Things that we did also well was focusing on the customer and product development. We really built an MVP that was basically what the customers were telling us to do. So we were very customer centric, and we did our own research and our own testing through the research that we do today, more or less. It was the same. It was obviously, done differently because it was a long time ago. But I really encourage entrepreneurs to focus on the customer from day one, and build a product that, again, is just ask for feedback. Ask for feedback. It's not that expensive. It's not that costly. It's not that time consuming. And we did build that. I mean, an example or an anecdote I can share with you is PayPal was one of our first customers back in 2009. And we sold them a license that I remember, if I remember correctly, was like $40,000 to $50,000 a year. We were stoked. We were so excited about this license, but it was one of the first ones. So we needed a renewal. Every SaaS business, the number one metric is retention, right? You want to retain at least 90% of the business every year. And so we had a meeting with them 6 months in to the contract, and we said, hey, we really want to renew. We're excited. Please give us your feedback. What is it that we have to do to renew, for you to renew? And so yeah, let us think about it. They came back a couple of weeks later. They had an Excel spreadsheet with 80 requests. 80 requests, 80. And we were still in Spain. back then with about maybe 5 to 10 engineers. How the hell we're going to do that? We looked at each other. We're just going to work hard. We obviously sacrificed quite a bit and worked really, really hard. That's a given. That's table stakes for me as an entrepreneur. And we ended up delivering 79 of those 80, and they renewed, and they've been a customer ever since. So, focus on the customer. A couple more things to share with you. Focus on culture. Culture is really important. And again, another thing that as I do it now, I realize that I didn't do a good job back in the day, but thank God we were able to correct it. Anybody, I don't know if this is an open forum, but if anybody knows who, or can answer the question, who said that culture can eat strategy for breakfast?
That's Drucker, if I recall correctly.
There you go. Thank you. I couldn't agree more with that. We do have a good strategy at UserZoom. So we got the best of both worlds, but culture is basically what happens when you're not there. That's how I answer the question of culture. Culture is how the team works and what they say and how they feel, not when you're asking them, but when you're not around as a leader. So obviously, right now it's too early because many of you are thinking of going to business or going into your own business, building your own business. But keep in mind, as you grow, the earlier you can focus on the culture and who you are, who you're about, establishing and setting up front really like what's the mission, why are we getting up in the morning, what is the purpose for the company, and what's the vision. That's what the founder, whether it's a CEO or not, he or she needs to dedicate time to that right from the get-go. So focus on culture. And then things that we could have done better. Actually, I was telling you about the customer feedback and focus on customer for product development from the very beginning. However, we didn't really take it to the extent, I guess, that I wish we would have. Today, design is very important, very, very important. So UX and the quality of the design, not just that it looks cool, but it works really well, it's easy, and it's really built for the end user. Any one of you who starts a company, if it's a website or it has a website or an app, which is very likely given the market conditions, everything starts with a website today, right? Even if you're a restaurant. Well, you'll notice that when you go through that process, you'll notice that you kind of get lost. And it's like, is this the right design? Do people understand it? Can they use it? Can they get to the task that they're trying to accomplish? And you'll notice that you lose control of that and you lose sight and you become biased. After a month, all you see is a yellow screen or a blue screen or whatever. So doing testing, which is what we do with UserZoom, but we didn't do it with our own product. I think we should have done that earlier. And so now, for instance, we're actually working, even though we're doing really well, we would be a $200 million business. I will tell you right now, I'm 100% certain that we would be a $200 million business, and our revenue would be, much higher and more profitable if we had a better product design. So we've been successful, but at the same time, I would tell you that that's one lesson I learned that we should have done better. Invest in UX design. And last but not least, we did raise, and we were we had a successful round, but at the same time, what I will tell you is that I would have bootstrapped the business, but I would have, and I get this question quite a bit, so I'm anticipating potential questions, but I would have actually bootstrapped for maybe 2-3 years instead of 7 years, which is what we ended up doing. Because the fact is that it was really, really difficult to bootstrap all the way to 15 million. You can save some of those, hard times by trying to finance. In our case, the issue was that, I was the only one here from Spain. I moved here to the Valley. My partners stayed in Barcelona, and I had a very, very low salary for a long time. I went back to living the same way I was living when I was at San Jose State in a very small apartment in Sunnyvale. And I think if we have raised, I think also the business would have been able to capture some opportunities that we maybe lost because of waiting so long. And again, it's easier said than done. It's a balance, and that's the equilibrium that is the art and science of being an entrepreneur and working with capital. But anyway, that's a little bit of in about 20 minutes or so, it's my story and UserZoom story, and I'm more than happy now to share more details and answer questions.
Thank you so much. People have already started asking questions in the Q&A. So if you have any questions, everyone, please add to them. So that's fascinating, Alfonso. Let's start with what you talked about, the, focusing on the customer. And you said that, you got customers like PayPal to adopt your product. So how did you go about doing that? So one of the questions that Jared posed is that one of the most daunting tasks when starting a business is knowing whether or not the dogs will eat your dog food. And so how did you know that the product you created would sell? And how did you know how to price it? And how did you approach customers like B2B, big customers like PayPal? And I think there's a follow-up to that. Yeah. So, and the follow-up to that is, were you shocked by the feedback that you received? And did you struggle to choose what to change based on what the customer said to you?
Yeah. So a lot of small questions within the same topic of customer feedback, but yes. I'll start with the PayPal example was a great example, and we were shocked, mostly because they worked a lot on those. 80 lines, in an Excel spreadsheet, you can imagine. So they really worked on it. But that shows what? It shows motivation. It shows interest. So that's another great thing about customer feedback, is that if you can open the door to it, if you're open to it, if you actually ask for it, it's a way to see if they're interested or not. If they don't give you feedback, that's a bad sign.
And did you approach them through somebody, or did you just did you get these?
No, we went directly to their office. This is the way it was done back then. We went directly to their office in San Jose. I remember exactly the room as it was yesterday, and walking away, they helped us to go to the parking lot, and it was the three of us. I was living here. My partners came from Spain that week, and we were talking to them. And Google, for instance, gave us another piece of feedback a little earlier. They said, hey, because we were providing a service, remember? Which I'll get to in a minute, because that was also, I think, that this is going to answer some of the other questions. But they told us, we love you as researchers, we love you as consultants, but can you give us the key to the car so that we can drive? Which basically meant to build a SaaS model, right? A self-service model. That also scared us, because we had to go back and go from a model that was on-premise, which is basically installed in our computers, to a on-demand server-based, on-demand SaaS model. But again, a great piece of feedback, because they told us, hey, if you give us that, we have a bunch of user experience professionals at Google. We want to use it ourselves, and we'll pay you the license. We'll pay you for a software license. So another piece of feedback right there, another piece of advice that ended up working really well, because again, Google has been a customer for all this time and is over $1 million in recurring revenue today. The pricing, I think one of the questions was around pricing. That's a tough one. That's a very good question and a tough question. How do we know? Look, I'm not going to tell you that by having 3, 4, 5 conversations, you're going to, with customers or prospects, you're going to have the key to paradise. This is just helping you a little bit, and it's giving you hints or tips or some potential options, but it's not necessarily the answer. The only answer and the only way that you can really figure it out, especially when it comes to pricing, is by actually launching the product, putting it out in the market, and testing it live in this case. You can certainly have some conversations, but the customer is not going to tell you, yeah, I'm willing to pay $40,000. They will pay you or not. And then with SaaS, what's really interesting is that with SaaS, you have to renew, as I said earlier. So if they renew, something is good with the pricing. If they don't renew, you really have to figure out why it is that they're churning. It's called churn or cancels. And if it's related to pricing, then you got to figure out a better pricing model. I know there was a bunch of other things within that question. I'm not sure if I got to all of them. But that's, that's about feedback.
I think you kind of answered, like, how did you approach these big companies? Well, you found the right people within the company and then got them to try your.
From a feedback perspective, today you have all kinds of products. So this is the feedback. How to get feedback today is like night and day compared to how it was when we started. Today you have all sorts of tools. Many of them are free. You can put a little survey on your website. You can intercept people and say, hey, please just tell me how we're doing. Or as a CEO, as a founder, you should definitely make time in your busy schedule to reach out to those users just to listen to them. Because how many of us didn't do that, right? You just launch the product and just sit there and wait. Some people maybe a little more introvert. No, you have to sit down and talk to the customer. This is the era of the customer. This is the era of the customer experience, where the customer has total control. They can cancel, they can buy, they have all of these competitors to choose from. So as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you must spend quality time with your customers. The guy that is still doing it all the time? Another local, he's not Spartan, but he's a local guy who's a phenomenal person and my favorite CEO, Eric Yuan, founder and CEO of Zoom. Yeah, so he talks to customers every week and he uses Zoom to talk to them, of course. It's all about that direct engagement. So one of the best, I think, advices that you will take today with my chat, hopefully, is that you have to talk to customers and that customer feedback is very important.
Okay, so another couple of questions are about the team. And, it's very difficult to start a business on your own. And in any case, you had a couple of co-founders, right? And so how did you find the co-founders? And how did you build a trustworthy team? And especially in your case, it was across continents.
Yes.
So, so how do you go about doing that? How do you recruit the people?
And it goes back to the point about culture. So, well, first, it is a very difficult, if not the most difficult task as the entrepreneur, is to find the right partner or partners. In our case, we were 3. It was very difficult because we all started in Spain, but then I left. And so we had to work, to your point, across international waters and a 9-hour difference. But here's what I would say. So in school, I know that a lot of businesses out there, they met each other at the school, whether it's a business school or master's, graduate or postgraduate, and you worked in a project together. So I would encourage to look around and see if there are potential partners out there with the same story, the same desire and passion. One. The second one is, in our case, it wasn't like that. My 2 co-founding partners met at postgraduate school in Barcelona. I met them at the previous consulting company before we started our own consulting. So they were actually co-workers. So sometimes if you're going to go into business, if you're going to start your own business, sometimes I actually say, hey, maybe you want to go out into the market and work for a company or 2 for a few years and just kind of get the feel for the market and what it is to work for a company. It also is a good way to find potential partners that share. In my case, I was very, very lucky to find these guys. So basically, the idea came from me, and I was just tired of seeing all these websites that were crappy websites, crappy experiences. And we still have them today, but back then it was even worse. We're talking 2000, 1999, 2000. We went to a restaurant and we talked about the idea of putting together a consulting company that would run tests. So we didn't design it, we didn't develop it, but we would just test it like an audit, like an independent audit. And I told them over lunch, and they loved the idea. And then we started working on it for 6 months. We did a full kind of business analysis and market research, a little bit like that. And through that research, you understand whether you're like really into it. And then the three of us left the consulting job, the high-paid consulting job back then, to start the business. So we share the risk, that it took. So I guess long answer to look around you in school, because that's a good potential place. The other one is work. If you do go to work, or if you have some sort of a working experience, look around and see if you fit. There's a lot of human part of this, by the way. It's a lot about human values and work ethic, and it's not just about business. I think it's a lot about that. However, I will say that it's a great question, Anu. Sorry, let me say one more thing about it before we move on to the next question, because I believe in something called the VI relationship, the VI model, the visionary integrator model. So when you're picking a partner, make sure that you look at those things that I just mentioned: values, work ethic, experience, passion, and vision. But at the same time, it's not enough. One of you should be a sales, a go-to-market, a extrovert, visionary, typically can foresee the future. That's what I was, by the way. I can see what's going to happen. You're the sales. You're always outspoken, and you're always open to talk to customers and sell them on something that sometimes is nothing, right? Because it's not cooked yet. That's one, at least one. The other one typically should be somebody who may not be so much of an extrovert and may not be comfortable with sales, but is kind of either the finance person or the operations person. That's why it's called visionary, VI, visionary and integrator. It's somebody who's much more, is going to make sure the train runs on time, and it's going to be much more worried on looking at the operations and the gross margins and all that stuff. Typically, somebody like me doesn't care so much about finance for at least a while, and then somebody else comes along and says, wait a minute, Alfonso, we have to pay for this. So the VI, and then last but not least, in the world we're in the technology world we're in, clearly you have to have a technology person there somewhere, right? Somebody who could be the CTO, an engineer, a product person that can put it together and build it. That would be an advice for a team.
Right. Yeah, that's really, really valuable. Did you have any mentors or any at the beginning that you went to, any advisors or mentors that you asked? Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend, highly recommend. And by the way, we are in the mecca of mentors. This is, I'm not sure how many of the attendees are here in the Valley, but this is why it's Silicon Valley to me. It's a mentality and a way of life more than a place, and especially a way of business life. So you find a lot of mentors out there who are actually willing to help. And at least it was for me. You have to ask. So you have to ask. But we had one in Spain, and he was pretty good. He was a professor at the master's program that my partners went to. I didn't do a master's. And then when I got here, I was at Plug and Play Tech Center. Plug and Play Tech Center is a great, unique place that helped us actually, out of Sunnyvale. Some of you may be familiar with them. But they have entrepreneurs in residence, and they did a good job mentoring me, with some of the key areas of scaling a business. I would not hesitate to find a mentor. It is crazy to be a founder, CEO, and launch a business. There's so many people doing the same thing, and there's so many opportunities. So don't make the same mistakes that a mentor maybe can help you and help you avoid. Especially if it's somebody who can, like me, for instance, right? So I'm not doing it right now much because I still want to continue the path of UserZoom and just focus on it. And we may go public next year and all that, so it's taking a lot of my time. But if you find people like me that maybe have exited and have time and are either investing or mentoring, there's a ton of them out there. Reach out to those guys, pitch to them, tell them why, maybe there's a fit. Maybe the business they founded was a B2B software marketplace or something that is related to what you're doing. I would highly encourage the use of mentors for sure.
Yeah. And just going back to the visionary question, one of the questions here is, did you have a vision of how successful UserZoom would be before starting the company? Nima asks, what was your focus?
Should.
Yeah.
You should have a vision, but I'll be honest. This is what's happened to a lot of entrepreneurs who ended up, scaling it and being very successful. And I'm not 100% there yet. If we go public or if we get bought out for a bunch of money, maybe I can say. But right now, I'm just claiming that we're okay. We're doing all right. There's a lot of companies and entrepreneurs who've done phenomenal, and I hope I can become one of them. But so far, just so good. I think one of the reasons why sometimes you create a business because you think there's nothing wrong with a lifestyle business. Absolutely nothing wrong with a lifestyle business. If you have a $10 million business, $10 million revenue business, and you have $1 million of EBITDA, you're already a champion, okay? You're already a super person with superpowers. There's nothing wrong with running a business that's even much smaller than 10 million, 2 million, and $500,000 maybe goes to the bank, or 200,000, or even break even, to be honest with you. What I'm trying to say here is, you'll do a great job and you'll serve a purpose and provide customers with value if you focus on delivering a great experience, a great product experience or a service experience. You can have customers, you can have great experiences at a restaurant. It doesn't have to be a tech company like ours, right? And so our vision, this I'm answering the question on the vision in a kind of a long way, but our vision was to have kind of a lifestyle business, scale it and grow it. We never thought the total addressable market was that big, was as big as today. Today we've calculated it about $15 billion and growing. So, and by the way, that's not us saying it, is some third party saying that. But when we started, we could barely count hundreds of millions. And so we didn't think. That's also why we didn't raise money.
Right.
The vision should always be to provide the best value and the best customer experience. That's what Jeff Bezos had. Actually, I was just watching a video of Jeff Bezos the other day talking to a audience. I don't know if it was a school or not, but he was asked, "Did you envision this?" And he said, "Hell no." I would never envision it. I was just trying to sell books online, and so try to deliver. What he did say is try to deliver and try to focus on delivering a great customer experience. And then if you're in a market that grows, who knows? It'll become a really large business. Now, having said that, you always should have a vision of where things can go. You should always, for me, a vision is futuristic, right? Mission is today, what the purpose is in business. Why are you getting up in the morning? Why are you doing business? But a vision is about where the puck is going. And you should have a vision that is at least 2 to 3 years ahead about where things are going and what the market is going to be like. And if you think big, actually, the chances of you getting big are much higher. Your vision needs to be convincing, and you should go to sleep and wake up in the morning with the pillow should be all about that 1 to 2 sentences of what it is that you do and where the things are going with your vision.
Mhm. Okay, that's great. Yeah. So and you kind of touch on that about the bootstrapping and raising institutional funding. So there are some questions on your experience. Did you try to raise money in Spain as well, or was it just in Silicon Valley?
A formal raise was in Silicon Valley. The Spain was very much a business angel seed capital effort. The fact is that if we hadn't raised, we could have probably continued on with the business because we overlapped the consulting business with UserZoom, the SaaS business. We overlapped for about 2 to 3 years. Maybe we would have had to keep both businesses if we hadn't done, a seed capital raise. That $1.5 million that I was referring to. Now, our situation, I realize, is very unique, and I don't know how many of the 100 and some attendees are in another country, but I think that when you're here, you have plenty of opportunities for seed capital. And my advice is to seek that seed capital from friends, family, fools, and some potential angels, things like that. But keep it simple and just make sure that it covers that next 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. Everyone would love to have a 2-year run capital and then see what happens. You know what happens when some entrepreneurs do that? They'll make decisions based on the fact that there's money in the bank. And sometimes that's good and it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. When you don't have the money in the bank, or you have very little, which is what I'm saying, is that you have just enough to get going. Yeah. You look at that money and it's precious. It's precious. Like what I tell my son about the basketball. It's worth $1 million. Protect it. Okay. don't let the competitor take it from you. If you don't have a lot of money, you're going to figure it out. You're going to be more creative. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to be more resourceful. Mm-hmm. So raise enough to get going and get traction and prove that the revenue is there, and then go for the higher rounds or bigger rounds later.
Right. There's a question. So how long did you take to break even? There's a question on how long. I mean, obviously it varies from company, business to business.
Yeah, that's one of the hard things about bootstrapping, is that you have to be break even fairly soon, mm-hmm. right? Because otherwise you just basically run out of money. Exactly. So if I remember correctly, I think we spent a good 2 to 3 years burning a little bit of cash. Sometimes we would make it, sometimes we didn't. Again, we raised a 1.5 in a 2 to 3 year period. So that's what's also complicated. I mean, again, it's all about hustle, guys. We raised initially 100,000. Actually, the very first check, now that I remember, the very first check, I think was more like a $10,000. If I remember correctly, it was 10,000 euros. We bought the computers, and we I don't know, business cards. It's like the very basic stuff. We asked for help for an office from a friend who said, yeah, just give you 6 months and you can just have that corner. That way we had an address. And then we did the first pilots, like we offered for free to customers in exchange for feedback. Mm-hmm. It's just, if you're resourceful and you go hard at it, those are ways that you can get going for 6 months or so. And then you go for the next 30,000, and maybe it's a bank loan or whatever. Maybe it's the family member that sees that you've been hustling for 6 months, and so on and so forth. We won this government grant for 100,000 euros about a year in, with our pitch and all that stuff. That's how we put it all together. And then finally, the family office that came in with a bigger check. That's how I moved to the US in 2009, because now I had enough to really take my chances and bring the family over and shut down operations in Madrid and leave the family and all that stuff.
Right.
But that's how we did it.
And so Matthew is asking, he saw an article that you moved from Barcelona to California, and as a European is wondering what you believe is hindering the emergence of startups in Europe as compared to Silicon Valley. Jane.
Oh, well, I'm pretty much an expert at that for sure. So I moved from Madrid. The article, I told him that our office has 100 people in Barcelona, our current office, and my partners are in Barcelona, but I'm personally from Madrid. So we were working out of the two cities. It's like working from, San Francisco and Los Angeles. The reason why Europe, it has changed a lot. Today it's a lot better. Okay. It's still, I think it's still, a culture and a capital issue, but it's a lot better. Today, it would be much easier to start in Spain and maybe even stay there for a while than, having to move here. Back in the day, I had to move here. The two things I said, culture and capital. Let's start with capital. Capital, there is a lot more capital now also available and a lot more seed capital. However, I remember in my experience, what I can tell you guys is that the valuation, for instance, it's related to how risk averse, which is also related to the culture. I'll get to that in a minute. But if an investor in Europe, let's take Spain, for instance, definitely France or Italy. A little bit less in London and the UK, where there's a lot more unicorns and successful companies. Sweden is another great country for that as well. But you take the vast majority of other countries, think about it, they don't have a lot of references, a lot of unicorns. They don't have a lot of Spotify's, for instance, who's out of Sweden, I think, other unicorns out there. And so what happens is that they're risk averse. The investors say, if I'm going to give you $2 million, you got to give me 40% of the business, or 25% of the business, and that's quite a bit to give up. That's going to cost you big time in the future. So why do they do that? It's because they don't have, I was just reading news this morning about one large fund in Spain, and they raised a $250 million fund. Whoa. That's not a big fund. That's a really small fund in the Valley and in the US. Just the Valley alone, that's not a large round. So if you have less capital, you're going to preserve it, and you're going to be much more careful, because Europe is a big continent. There's a big, region, but don't forget, there are small countries with very different cultures. Leads me to the second thing, which is culture. Anecdotes that I think some of you would probably appreciate and understand. I was told 1,000,000 times what kind of fool and crazy tech.com entrepreneur, I was when I had my business idea and when I wanted to go into business. As I said in that same article, it came from my own family. And my big brother was like, come on, you have a successful career in the consulting job. Why would you do that to yourself? I had friends and I had other people. I remember I was working at the consulting company before I went to my own business. And I remember somebody told me 2 years, 3 years later, after we were doing really well, that they had given us 6 months. In 6 months, we would be back to the old job. What I'm trying to say is that the difference in culture it's important. If you're in the US, but in general in the Valley, you're surrounded by people that are going to encourage you every day and are going to feed you with positive, go, positive reinforcement and faith and all sorts of that. There's so many other references. Over there, it's a big risk. People want to have a 9 to 5 job. I'm generalizing here. There's a stereotype, but okay, yeah. I think there is some truth to it. So I think it's hard to be an entrepreneur. It's harder to be an entrepreneur that comes from Spain or from a different country to the US, and it's even harder to do it in a bootstrap. So I've done all, and that's why I have scars all over the place to prove it.
So, wow, we have 3 minutes left, and we have loads of questions, but one is
I
simple.
can stick around for a few more minutes if you guys don't mind. I'm happy to help.
Right. Well, I guess we can go on for a few more minutes. I don't know whether the students have to, have classes. So, but one is, when will you go public and what's your ticker symbol? And
That's a very short answer. So we give time for others.
yeah,
If we do go public, it's probably Q4 22, maybe Q1 23. That's the targets that we're selecting. It's really going to depend on our growth rate. And the many things you have to do to prepare to go public and have a successful IPO. And that's something we don't really have a ton of control over, but that's more or less the window. Q4 22, Q1 23. In terms of sticker, I have no clue. That's the last thing you want to think about. There's plenty to think about. A long list of things to do before you go public.
That'd be a simple question. And then there was another one about one about how you chose your investors. Like, how did you, when
that's a great question.
Scale, and then the final question.
That's a great question. That's a great question. So, because it's important, and it's the first thing I'll say is, once you have an investor, it's not like it's like a marriage without a divorce. So, hey, couples may have a bad experience if they divorce. With an investor, you can't. And so you better do your due diligence. You really, sometimes you have no choice. We were fortunate to have plenty of choice at UserZoom in all the rounds that we did. But that's also why I'll go back to that original point about bootstrapping and taking it as far as possible, because you want to have choices. But I would say that, back to the culture comment, really see if you can spend a good amount of time with those investors outside of that boardroom, outside of the business context. Go for lunch, go for coffee, talk about family, talk about hobbies, talk about values, get to know them. And it may not be the best partner is the highest valuation. Mm-hmm. We didn't choose Sunstone because of the highest valuation. We chose them because they got the business, they got the idea, they bought into the vision. Mm-hmm. At a growth stage, the vision is there, and you just support it with additional gas. Like we did last year, we raised 100 million. They're supporting, they really were like part of the journey. They just wanted to support us. But the original funding round was all about faith. I believe in the market. So I would focus on an investor that has a culture fit and that understands the market, has done research in the market, believes in it, and shows you that they see the vision and they believe in you. Yeah. It's a short answer for the time we have, but it's a really important question.
Mm-hmm. And then there's so many questions. But in terms of your scaling, you're going for an acquisition strategy. Is that right?
I'm laughing because somebody's asking if they get a discount for being an SJSU student for stocks in UserZoom. That's not up to me. It's not up to me, but that's a great question. Sorry, what was the question that you had?
So, the last question was the final question is, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self? What do you wish you would have known if, when you were 20?
We don't have time for that. There's so many things. There are so many things. I think I thought that I could do it all, and I was very hard on myself, and I think at times in the team, very aggressive. I actually realized that over time, the less aggressive and the less, you can't expect everybody to follow you on your journey. Sometimes some people are just interested in working for you, but not necessarily give up everything like a baby, like it's your baby. So I would tell myself, hey, you don't need to push it that hard. I think I pushed it hard, and I might have burned a couple of bridges there, in the past. That's one thing. I think I would have learned a little bit more. I should have learned a lot more about finance and business. Even though I went to business school, I should have gone a little. I was not that good at accounting. I wasn't that good in those classes, and I think I should have. I would go back and say, Alfonso, you should have been a better finance leader or better at finance. That's something that I remember. I don't have a lot of regrets, but I think that that would have helped me if I go back and tell a 20-year-old Alfonso. Those two things, stick out. But there's plenty others. We just don't have a lot of time. I can take another few. We can go to 5:05. I'm open to continue.
Yeah. Well, the other question I had was, but that's not the best question to end with. Which is your your strategy for growth, which because you got all this, you got $100 million, and someone was asking, one of the students said, well, what are you going to, how are you going to be allocating that, and what are you going to be spending it on? And you have spent it on some acquisitions. Yes,
we've done 4 acquisitions. The first one was so small, I could hire 10 people. The last 3 were a little more product oriented, and so it's another part of my everyday learning experience at UserZoom as an entrepreneur who's scaling his first startup in this case, and it's acquiring companies. Certainly, I'm more than open to explore new companies to acquire. It's not easy to grow organically, and so inorganic path makes sense, especially if you have experience and it's worked out well. But the one thing I would say is that when you're looking at it from the perspective of first-time entrepreneur or somebody who's in the early stages, who probably quite a few of the attendees here are in that stage, it seems like, oh my God, because I remember thinking like that. I remember thinking, oh my God, if they give me $100 million, I don't even know what I would do. The first thing I would say to answer the question is that not all 100 million, I can be transparent about this without giving up any secrets or any confidential data, but not all of it goes to growth and investing. Some of it actually has gone to the original investors who basically used the fund. We use the fund raised for secondary, meaning for liquidity, and part of it was to buy stock from original investors. And so in 2 cases, this has happened to both us as founders and the original investors. They got some really nice return on investment. Having said that, we do have to have a growth plan and strategy, because otherwise they wouldn't just come in, right, and write the check. But what happens when you're in the business already, for about a decade or even just 10 years, even just 5 years, is that there are so many things happening when you're growing that it's so easy to come up with a growth strategy. For instance, in our case, we're not even, we are in Europe and we are in the US. So about 75% of the revenues in Europe and in the US. But we're not even in APAC, Asia Pacific market. We just have a few customers in Australia, but that's it. That's one geographic expansion that we look forward to in 2022. Mm-hmm. The other one is I have a ton of ideas of how we can expand the product. And we're going to use the funds to hire. Well, we already have, actually, because this was a round that we closed last year. We really ramped up on the engineers, designers, so product people, and also the go-to-market people. So here's another interesting lesson learned is, depending on the stage you're in, you want to understand the percentage of spend according to your revenue, right? So the percentage of spend in go-to-market or sales and marketing, and the percentage on your R&D. And the good news is that you can actually go out and benchmark how much you should be spending, how much of the revenue should be spent on those functional areas, right? Like go-to-market and engineering. And we were actually pretty low on both. Maybe mostly because the engineering team is in Barcelona. But that's the growth strategy is as simple as push product, push sales and marketing. By the way, we are literally about to hire our first CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, knock on wood, the shield sign. And then the second is, the third is the geo expansion.
Right. That's great. Okay.
I'm going to jump in with one final question here, if I may.
Please.
And then because we're starting to lose some folks because they've got other commitments. But right, you've alluded to this in certain ways, but COVID is certainly the great disruptor. At least it is in my industry, right? I mean, we're teaching online, we're running this event online. I don't think we're going to come back the same as we were, sort of pre-pandemic. How has COVID affect, sort of two-parter, but brief, affected the way you think about culture, and has affected the way your customers are actually thinking about your business?
So COVID has been terrible for humanity and terrible for many industries, yet it's been great to us. I have to admit it. I have to say it openly, and I'm sad about what's happened, but at the same time, I can't be sad about the fact that it's impacted us so positively. We offer a business, we offer a product that allows or enables the remote economy. We're not Zoom, we're UserZoom, but we do basically what Zoom does for video conferencing and for communication, we do for our product, our space of research and testing, websites and apps. So our growth has increased from about 35% to 50% in this year and a half pandemic time. To go back to your question on culture, the very first thing we did, and this I give a lot of credit to our chief people officer. She's a VP of people, but she will become hopefully chief people officer soon. She just went all in. And the very first thing we did in that March of 2020 was to reach out to our employees and just ask what it is that we could do to enable them to do their work and to work and live remotely, and how we could do that. We started doing all sorts of things, starting with a very simple UserZoom, we call them UserZoom together, meetings on Monday morning here in Pacific, to just get together and talk, and even give everybody a chance to breathe and to vent out. We gave people, we gave them some, basic, simple financials so that they can make it work at home. Think about it. In Europe, a lot of people don't even have, they're in a flat in the 6th floor, and they don't have space, and maybe they have babies. So we gave them a ton of flexibility on the what we call we don't really care about where you do your work and how you do it, as long as you provide it with the quality that we want, and it's aimed at the objectives that we have in the company. So if people wanted to work at different time zones or different moments, take breaks, things like that. We also added more health benefits. So basically, we went all out in the importance of what we call people first culture, a people first company. We changed our values, and we were talking a lot about customer experience and things like that. And we went and said, no, people is the #1 value. Everything is about our people, and we take care of our people. And then it became all detailed. So small details and small things here and there. We're not going back. We actually decided to not renew the lease in San Jose, in our San Jose office. We're not going to have an office in San Jose or in the Bay Area. About 40 to 50 people. We've decided to, if we do in January 2022, we'll have a co-working space, maybe like a WeWork or something like that. And then we use our own product to survey our own employees on a constant basis. How are we doing? How can we help? And we actually went for a hybrid model. So Barcelona opened an office. Denver, I think, is open, is a sales office for us here in the US. Everybody else, they could just stay home. So we changed our mindset. But then ultimately, it's about listening, and approach it with an open mind as a leader, that the world is changing, and that your employees are as valuable, actually more valuable, I would say, than your customers.
Great note to end on. Alfonso, thank you so much for your words of wisdom. Manu, thank you so much for your facilitation. Verenia, for your technological help. Manu, any final words for our...
Yes, I was remiss in not thanking the IDEAS Club because Varenia is from the IDEAS Club, and we have the other officers here as well. And this is a joint event hosted by the SVC and the IDEAS Club. So thank you very much to them. And then one final word, and that is that we have a session we have an information session for the Zin Starter program. Can you see it, or?
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, we are having this on the 30th of September. So any students who'd like to attend are most welcome to do so. And you can learn about this program and get some small amount of funding to help you with your startup. Thank you so much.
I also dropped my
Thank
email.
you so much, Dan, for being here.
Just wrote my email there in case you'd like to connect with me. I'm a big user of LinkedIn, so happy to connect with anyone.
Terrific.
Thank you so much.
All right,
That's
thanks,
fantastic.
everybody. Stay well.
Thank you for
stay
having me.
healthy. Take care.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me. Bye-bye.